On this Monday night, political games over capital gains. The federal government tables its motion for a controversial tax hike targeting the wealthy.
But millions more will benefit from it.
Why they may be banking on the opposition to vote against it. The aftermath of Europe's parliamentary elections, the far-right fallout suddenly pushing France into another risky vote. Plus, dual shark attacks within a day down in Florida.
Extremely unusual for two to happen in the same afternoon.
Why Atlantic Canadians are being asked to be vigilant. And from the court to the classroom.
If you just believe in yourself, you don't know where it could take you.
The BC Streetball stars now working to inspire at-risk youth.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. The federal Liberals drew a line in the political sand today, officially tabling a motion to increase the contentious capital gains tax. It's a cornerstone of their 2024 budget, and it could add close to $20 billion to federal coffers over the next 5 years. But many of Canada's doctors and other business owners are not happy. As Eric Sorensen tells us, the opposition leader has yet to say how he will vote.
I ask that an order of the day be designated.
With no fanfare, the first tax hike in capital gains since the Mulroney government was tabled today in Ottawa. The federal Liberals see a defining political moment. New tax revenue to fund investments in everything from housing to dental care.
The responsible way to pay for those investments is to ask those at the top to contribute a little bit more.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Yet with a vote expected Tuesday, Conservatives have had little to say ever since the federal budget. In question period, the government was pressed on foreign interference, the cost of living, the carbon tax.
Conservatives have been saying for months to axe the tax.
But not a question on imminent tax increases in capital gains.
Tomorrow, they're going to have to stop deflecting and evading and take a stand. We'll see if they support fairness for every generation.
How will it work, for example? Until now, a person who makes $1 million in capital gains has seen 50% or $500,000 subject to tax. Under the new rules, it's 50% on the first $250,000 and almost 67% on the rest. So in this example, $625,000 will now be subject to tax instead of $500,000. Despite a furious pushback from doctors, entrepreneurs, and owners of secondary properties like cottages, the changes are coming this month. One clothing store owner in Toronto feels blindsided by Ottawa.
Everything I make goes back into the business right now. They're trying to frame it in a certain way to, make it look like it's just the ultra rich. But no, I'm a normal, hardworking Canadian that's getting hit by this.
Critics say innovators will stop investing.
And all of them indicate that this is something that will make it more difficult for us to be able to grow, create opportunity, and ultimately prosperity to pay for the social programs we care about.
Others say the policy makes taxation more fair.
This starts to get us closer to level playing field between wage earners and those who get windfalls from capital gains.
The Liberals are counting on far more voters supporting the plan than opposing it, and hope this time it's the official opposition that will feel the heat if they campaign against it. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
The first tax on capital gains was introduced in 1972 by Pierre Trudeau. Before that, capital gains were tax-free. Throughout most of the 70s and 80s, taxes were paid on half of capital gains. In 1988, Brian Mulroney's Progressive Conservative government increased the inclusion rate to 66%, then 75% in 1990. To spur innovation and investment, Jean Chrétien's Liberals dropped it back to 50% at the turn of the century, and it has remained at that rate until now. We're hearing a reaction from the Prime Minister tonight after a National Security Committee last week alleged some members of Parliament wittingly participated in foreign meddling. We're also learning today that the federal government will support a push to expand the scope of an inquiry into the issue. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson is following developments for us tonight.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took questions from the media for the first time since the scandalous allegations that parliamentarians have colluded with foreign powers broke a week ago.
I think it's extremely important that we continue to take
foreign interference with all the seriousness that it requires.
The Conservatives have been calling for the names of the accused parliamentarians to be released.
Canadians need to know who these MPs are.
Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc says doing so would be a criminal offence.
The Conservatives are pretending that you can stand up and release a list of names. Mr. Speaker, I asked the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP, Mark Flynn, this morning, what would happen if I stood up and announced a list of names like my colleagues are asking me to do? And he said I would be subject to criminal prosecution. So guess what, Mr. Speaker? I'm not going to do that.
Senior national security sources told Global News that the RCMP would consider the release of the names to be a criminal offence. That's because they are from classified documents, and the release of classified information is an offence under the Security of Information Act. The NDP and Bloc Québécois have both said they would kick any MP who engaged in foreign interference out of their caucuses.
There is no way I will approve them to run as a candidate, nor would I allow them to continue to sit in my caucus if they are named and they knowingly worked with a foreign government to undermine our country. I expect other party leaders to do the same thing.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and Green leader Elizabeth May have both said that they are requesting classified briefings from the government.
I've asked to look at the unredacted copy of all documents related to this serious set of allegations.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is not eligible to be briefed because he has declined to submit for a security clearance. Former National Security Advisor Dick Fadden says the Prime Minister needs to take more leadership on this file.
There would have to be some leadership from the Prime Minister of the day. Ideally, a new Prime Minister would take a different approach on the issue of partisanship.
The Liberals have repeatedly said that the RCMP will investigate, and they are now supporting a bloc motion to refer the allegations about parliamentarians to the Hogue Commission. But experts have already said the inquiry's scope is too broad and the timeline is too short. Farah?
Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa. Thank you, Mercedes. For the first time, the United Nations Security Council has approved a U.S.-backed ceasefire deal. 14 members of the council voted in support. Russia abstained. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken also began another visit to the Middle East to push the Biden administration's latest peace plan.
The only party that's not said yes is Hamas. That's who everyone's waiting on. Does Hamas want to end this conflict, end this war that it started, or not? We'll find out. But it's clear that
two of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's ministers have vowed to bring down the government should it accept any deal with Hamas. Late today, Blinken met with Netanyahu to pressure him to move forward with his plan. Dramatic videos emerged of what's believed to be that Israeli hostage rescue in Gaza over the weekend. 4 Israelis were freed in a daytime raid on Saturday, an operation that the Palestinian Health Authority says killed 274 people. Israeli soldiers blasted their way through the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza and found 3 male hostages huddled in an apartment block. A 4th female captive was being held in a nearby apartment. Soldiers provided cover as the captives fled on foot. The soldiers and hostages appeared to barely make it to safety as shots were fired around them. They were then loaded onto a military helicopter for the flight back to Israel. Canada and the UK are teaming up to investigate the 2023 data breach at genetic testing company 23andMe. Privacy watchdogs will examine the scope of the data that was compromised and whether the company had proper safeguards to protect the highly sensitive information it handled. The investigation will also look into whether 23andMe adequately notified regulators and the nearly 7 million affected customers about the leak. The company sells DNA test kits to consumers to uncover information about their health and ancestry. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Quebec Premier François Legault are vowing to work together to address the province's ongoing struggle with immigration. Legault says Ottawa is offering $750 million to help pay for the recent surge in asylum seekers.
I think it's about time that we put targets with figures, and the problem is urgent. So we cannot say we'll continue working for months and months about the principles. It's about time we put some targets.
This comes after Legault and Trudeau met today in Quebec City. Legault had been asking for $1 billion to cover costs incurred from 2001 to 2023. According to Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, Quebec received more than 45% of all asylum applications last year. In addition to the money, the federal government is pledging to work with other provinces to distribute temporary immigrants across the country and to improve the visa system. In Toronto, the smoke has settled and the scope of the damage to the city's historic St. Anne's Anglican Church is clear. The treasured dome roof, once adorned with intricate artwork, is gone. And paintings by 3 Group of 7 artists have been destroyed. Toronto police say they are not currently treating the fire as suspicious. No one was injured, as the church, a National Historic Site, caught fire on Sunday morning.
And I was just ordained as a priest actually in this church 2 weeks ago. Even just this morning, neighbours have been coming by and sharing their memories of weddings they attended there.
It's such a loss for not just those who are part of the community itself, but right across the land. It's an architectural gem that's gone.
St. Anne's was built in 1908, and church leaders are vowing to rebuild. Closing arguments were heard in a Winnipeg courtroom today in the trial of a confessed killer. Lawyers for Jeremy Skibitsky want him found not criminally responsible due to mental illness. But the Crown argues he knew what he was doing when he allegedly preyed upon Indigenous women in homeless shelters. And a warning, some of the details in this story are disturbing.
Protesting and drumming in the streets outside of court as lawyers made their closing arguments in the case. 37-year-old Jeremy Skibitsky has admitted to killing 4 Indigenous women in 2022. Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and an unknown woman Indigenous leaders have named Buffalo Woman. Skibitsky has pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder in their deaths. His lawyers are asking him to be found not criminally responsible, arguing he was suffering from schizophrenia at the time of the killings. During the trial, the court heard disturbing details on how Skibitsky preyed on his victims and committed what prosecutors call vile sexual acts on their dead bodies before dumping their remains. The Crown says the killings were purposeful and racially motivated. During the trial, a forensic psychiatrist called by the defense testified that Skibitsky was suffering from schizophrenia, but another expert called by the Crown said he believes Skibitsky doesn't have a mental disorder and instead was driven to kill by perverse sexual interests. During a press conference Monday, the families say the end of the trial brings mixed emotions.
We know as a family that we are going to get justice and he is going to get convicted on all 4. There is no grounds for an NCR. He has nothing to reach for anymore.
The remains of one of the victims were found in a dumpster and a city-owned landfill in spring 2022, while 2 other victims are believed to be in another landfill outside the city. That has prompted calls to have that site searched. As for the 4th victim, Buffalo Woman, the location of her remains are still unknown. Farah?
Marnie Blunt in Winnipeg. Thank you, Marnie. Bad news tonight for anyone living in Calgary. It's going to be at least 3 to 5 days before water use in the city will go back to normal after a major water main break last week.
We want to know if any of the adjacent pieces of pipe are also damaged in any way before we start closing this up. So do we have to remove another piece of pipe or not? So we're waiting for that analysis.
Today, crews inserted an inspection tool into the pipe to confirm if any other portions need repair. Once that information has been analyzed, the city hopes to provide an updated timeline for when water restrictions will end. The cause of the break is still under investigation. Emmanuel Macron's big gamble coming up. Can the French president's risky snap election stave off his rising far-right rivals? Voters in France had barely cast their ballots in Sunday's European elections when President Emmanuel Macron told them there would be a national parliamentary election in just 3 weeks. Macron called the vote in response to his humbling defeat in the EU vote, the far-right National Rally Party getting more than double the votes of the president's Renaissance Party. But as Redmond Shannon reports, gains made by hard-right parties were more modest across Europe as a whole.
46 days to the Olympic Games, but a new clock has suddenly started ticking across France. President Emmanuel Macron's election call for the end of the month after a huge defeat for his party in the European elections, losing out badly to the far-right National Rally. Its leader Marine Le Pen says she wants to bring together all men and women who are patriots. The decision of Macron to go to the polls in the face of such a result came out of the blue.
Like most French, I was absolutely stunned.
This political analyst notes Macron has won big bets before, but right now the dice appear loaded against him.
Some of the risk is that, the far right gets emboldened and enthusiastic because they just come out of a win, so why wouldn't they win more? The other risk is that leftist voters and even centrist voters feel Macron is sort of forcing them again to rally in the face of the far right.
Across the rest of the EU, the overall swing to the far right was small, but not in Italy or Germany. The anti-immigrant AfD party came second in Germany above the governing Social Democrats. Chancellor Olaf Scholz ruled out calling an election there, but admitted it's not business as usual. This German voter says he had naively convinced himself the far right couldn't get so many votes. The EU Parliament sits close to the French-German border, between the bloc's two original driving forces, a union established in the wake of the Second World War and the defeat of fascism, designed specifically to prevent the past from repeating itself. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Still ahead, why Atlantic Canadians should keep caution at the beach. Beachgoers in Florida are on high alert after two shark attacks happened just 6 kilometers apart on the same day. Although experts say such attacks are rare, it's a reminder that people can often find themselves in the same waters as ocean predators. Heidi Petrachik reports on the attacks and what they mean for beachgoers as sharks follow their food north.
Warning flags in Walton County, Florida, signaled the waters here were off limits after two shark attacks in the same area of the Panhandle Friday injured 3 people, 2 critically.
Extremely unusual for 2 to happen in the same afternoon within 4 miles of one another.
Experts say shark attacks are statistically rare. Officials are trying to figure out exactly what happened and why.
This time of the year, there's quite a bit of bait fish very close to the shore. And sharks are attracted to that as their normal prey. The shark became confused and mistaken a person for its natural prey.
The attack in the Gulf is probably done by bull sharks, which are characteristic of these shallow water areas.
Those sharks don't end up this far north. The Atlantic Ocean is too cold. But Nova Scotia beachgoers know there can be others.
We were here, my wife was doing the life-saving championships that were here, and there was a great white, so they had to shut it down.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that worried. Like, this is their home, so I'm respectful of that.
The first white shark sighting off Nova Scotia this season has been captured on film 450 meters off a different beach an hour from Halifax. Fred Wariski says more sightings of white sharks in particular over the past several years mean conservation efforts are working. And now is the time to remind ocean swimmers of safety basics.
Swimming in dawn and dusk, and at night for that matter, is not a real good idea. Try not to go swimming alone. Try not to be hanging around areas where you have seals.
Back in Walton County, Florida, beaches have reopened. Warning flags now indicate dangerous marine life may still be present. Swim at your own risk. Heidi Petrachik, Global News, Halifax.
Handle with care. Next, how a pair of Canadian streetballers is using their story to inspire at-risk youth. A former Canadian streetball group is the focus of a documentary chronicling their rise, fall, and rebirth. Known as Nautic, they played outside the confines of professional basketball, but still left a lasting impression on the game. As Neetha Garcha reports, their story is now serving as an important teaching tool in the classroom.
On the court, King Handles and Johnny Blaze, as they're known on the streetball scene, find connection and community. The sport served as a refuge from the challenges of assimilation and discrimination they faced as youth.
Remember when we used to do the stiff leg? Yeah. And then shift your hands, side to side. That's a Johnny Blaze signature. Yeah.
It's also what brought them fame as teenagers.
I think it's my first love. You know what I mean? Streetball is my first love. If you just believe in yourself, you don't know where it could take you. 1, 2, 3. I like that one there.
Their streetball team, called the Nautic, formed nearly 25 years ago, comprised of mostly black immigrants. It's the subject of this documentary recently introduced into a BC school district. Rising to fame in the early 2000s, the team from Metro Vancouver was featured in international magazines and inspired teams around the world.
Going to Japan, China, and Asia is totally different than Vancouver. I had coaches telling me, don't play this jungle ball, that's just terrible. So by me hearing that, it's like, okay, like, you don't want us to play like black people?
Yo, so this guy right here, King, rapper.
Now, as Safe School Program liaisons, they work with at-risk youth who face similar challenges.
How did that scene make you feel? How could that relate to the immigrant struggle?
This teacher says the film about their story has been an invaluable teaching tool.
Basketball just ends up being the medium and the backdrop for us to talk about so many other things like racism, there's addiction in there, it's about creativity, it's about self-expression. So we had addiction with Rory's story, we had the immigrant experience.
Relationships equals prevention, right? So if I have relationships with these kids, they come up to me, they trust me, they tell me what's going on.
As their dedication shifts from the courts to the classrooms.
I call this the wall of impact, all the youth that I've worked with, and I cherish it. It shows that the work that I'm doing is valuable.
Their legacy inspiring a new generation, showing the impact of the Nautic reaches far beyond the game itself. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Surrey, BC.
And that's Global National for this Monday. I'm Farah Nasser. Tonight's Your Canada is the Gordie Howe International Bridge. It's set to open next year in Windsor, Ontario. We love seeing your Canada, so please email your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Until tomorrow, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Good night.